and most cherished aspiration of devolution. In other words, the question was never whether devolution would happen, but only in what form. The drive to devolve stemmed from the bitter experience of extractive colonial institutions, which invested heavily in the White Highlands and brutally neglected elsewhere. This practice found expression in the National Economic Planning and Development Policy promulgated shortly after independence, which formalized inequalities and marginalization and led to the emergence of zero-sum politics and gross inequality in the allocation of public resources that informed our early years of our nationhood. This resulted in underdevelopment and economic stagnation, weakening of nationhood through strained bonds of cohesion and common endeavor, and a torn social fabric. Kenyans knew what the problem was, and as well, they knew what was the cause. This is the reason for the unanimous insistence on decentralization and sharing across the country. I therefore recall engaging with my parliamentary colleagues over a protracted period about how many levels of decentralization there would be and how many territorial or geographical units of devolved governance we would need. Some people went for 4 levels of governance, while others preferred only 2. An ambitious middle ground proposed 3 levels. Similarly, reluctant devolutionists campaigned for 8 units to coincide with the administrative provinces, whereas others wanted 14 regions, yet others demanded numbers varying from 24 to 56. I happen to have been part of this history, and I am very privileged that I participated in this conversation. And I'm very happy that today we are celebrating 10 years of devolution. What was no longer subject of controversy or subject of canvassing was the principle and object of devolution. The people had been clear, and on 27 August 2010, Kenyans ratified a constitution which embedded devolution into the very definition of our republic under Article 6 that describes the territory of Kenya, not only in terms of its boundaries, but also according to our counties. In Article 10, the Constitution also highlights sharing and devolution of power, democracy, and participation of the people, as well as equity, social justice, inclusiveness, non-discrimination, and the protection of the marginalized as national values and principles of governance, with peremptory implications for the exercise of constitutional authority by any person at any place at any time. Counties are therefore intrinsic to the Constitution and proper definition of the Republic of Kenya. They exist to serve as platforms of actualization of the sovereignty of the people in several fundamental ways. They make state power more democratic and accountable and promote unity through diversity by arbitrating between competing political impulses towards disintegration on one end and over-centralization on the other. Devolution also restored to the people their powers of self-governance and promoted their participation in the exercise of powers of state and in making of all decisions that affect them. Under devolution, our communities regained the right to manage their own affairs, while the interests and rights of minorities and marginalized could no longer be ignored. Article 174F of the Constitution sets out what the chair of the Council of County Governors, my dear sister there, Anne Mumbi Waiguru, correctly referred to as the role of county governments as the last mile implementers of critical development agenda, including the AU's Agenda 2063, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Kenya's Vision 2030, and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. It states that one objective of the devolution of government is to promote social and economic development and the provision of proximate, easily accessible services throughout Kenya, as is that of enhancing checks and balances and separation of power. To remove any doubt as to what Kenyans really wanted to do with devolution, the Constitution sets out one object of devolution to be that of facilitating the decentralization of state organs, their functions and services from the capital of Kenya. By design, devolution was destined to instigate unprecedented transformative change in every part of our political governance and development reality. It recalibrated our democracy, development, and reoriented policymaking by simply redefining what was at stake at all times and handing over power to the people in their greatest number. This change was dramatic, and a change management framework was essential to the smooth transition into the brave new world that we got ourselves into. Despite the efforts of the Transition Authority and the Commission for the implementation of the Constitution, the inauguration of devolution a decade ago was fairly noisy. And I know it because I have had the privilege of being the chair of IBEC since the first day we rolled out devolution until I changed jobs. Executives of both levels could not agree on mandates, each suspicious that the injury of losing functions would inevitably be followed by the insult of losing funding. Legislatures, too, had their friction. At the same time, county assemblies and executives had many a disagreement over respective authority and limits, while and the National Assembly engaged in a tug of war over oversight and budget-making mandates, even as both eyed the national executive with restless suspicion. We were suspected by the National Assembly. We were also suspected by the Senate. So we didn't have many friends. The Council of Governors quickly emerged as a forceful champion of quick and total devolution, challenging elements in the national government which were still reluctant to let go of many powerful functions. I remember we had in the law a period of 3 years to transfer functions, but we transferred almost 90% of the functions in the first year. And many people thought we didn't make the right decision. With the benefit of hindsight today, I think we made the right decision to accelerate the devolution of functions because it gave county governments the opportunity to develop the capacities to be able to appropriate those functions and take over their mandates. Those were very hard times because I remember them. But there were also times of fast learning and quick adaptation to relentless change. We discovered the limits of adversarial competition and zero-sum contests and recognized the power of alternative dispute resolution and patient consensus building. Article 189 began to make sense and to take shape of a very inspired consent while the intergovernmental frameworks, Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, and the Intergovernmental Summit revealed their value, because we managed to sort out many things using these frameworks in a negotiated way rather than taking things to court. Once everyone was finally clear that there were no losers, no winners in the transformation, and that devolution and Kenyans had won, leaders at both levels of government finally got round to recognize the brilliant genius of the people of Kenya in never once doubting the power and the promise of devolution. Devolution has grown tremendously in a decade. It has matured from a delicate fledgling with limited institutional capacity to administer resources, provide services, and generate own revenues, to fully operational governments touching the lives of people at the grassroots, undertaking ambitious development programs and driving economic growth. And we commend our county governments for the transformation that is visible in the Republic of Kenya. There remains much more to do, and many shortcomings are still evident. But only a serious, inattentive person would say today that devolution has no impact in any part of Kenya. And you have to be really ungrateful. Very often, many of the positive outcomes of devolution are evident to those who have observed our rural areas and formerly remote and neglected regions over time. I am particularly encouraged by what we have achieved in the areas of health, agriculture, education, infrastructure, trade, development in the last 10 years of devolution. It is true that devolution has encountered setbacks owing to poor coordination, administrative rigidities, and inefficiencies, which have suppressed effective performance. At the same time, there remains capacity shortfalls, which also contribute to suboptimal performance and frequently poor to absent implementation of policies, programs, and projects. It cannot be denied that on the whole, the management of the equitable allocation framework can do with a timely and more efficient administration. Delays in disbursing allocation to counties have tremendous negative effects which cascade all the way to the households at grassroots level, leading to poor outcomes in many sectors. There is no excuse for this, and we simply have to do better. As has been said here evidently, and as I made a commitment, there are three fundamental issues that inform this particular assertion. Number one, we made a commitment that we are going to analyze and frame all the remaining functions that are still being discharged by national government and transfer them to the counties. I am very happy that between the national government and the transition, the committee that is responsible for that job, and the other stakeholders, we have finally agreed on the functions that should be transferred. An analysis is going on the funding that will accompany the transfer of those functions. And I am told that in the next 60 days, we should be able to transfer all the remaining functions to our counties. Number two, as was said by the Council of Chair, the Chair of the Council of Governors, being a strong believer in devolution and having made a commitment that we will do what is possible to make sure that we try, to the extent possible, to keep to the timelines of disbursing money that is due to counties. Two things have happened. Unlike last financial year, where We crossed the year with about 30 billion due to counties. This year, I did make sure that every cent that was meant for counties was paid before we closed the books for last year. And again, we have paid the July allocation on time. I intend, to the extent possible, to keep to this schedule so that counties can manage their issues, deliver on their mandate, serve the people at the grassroots, roll out their programs, implement their projects in a timely manner and in a way that benefits people at the grassroots. It is for the reason that I have managed to do that with my administration. We also gave a commitment to support the bottom-up economic transformation agenda by promoting stronger performance at grassroots through collaboration with county governments and enhancing the equitable allocation of the county governments from 370 billion in the 2022-2023 financial year to 385.4 billion in 2023-2024 financial year. The Equalization Fund was also allocated 8.3 billion, an increase of 1.2 billion in the same period. We made a firm commitment to the people of Kenya to strengthen devolution by implementing specific interventions. First, we undertook to transfer all the functions, as I have said. Second, we pledged to implement a framework that ensures national agencies carry out devolved or shared mandates, operate a funding followed functions principle with respect to devolved functions, which I have said we will roll out in the next 2 months. Additionally, we promise to support county governments in improving their capacity to generate their own income and reduce over-reliance of transfers from the national government. I will speak to that later. Further, we vowed to ensure that shareable revenue is transferred to counties in a timely and predictable manner and in accordance with the law. Finally, we undertook to transfer funds owed to beneficiary counties under the Mining 2016 and the Petroleum 2019 Acts, and to collaborate with counties to increase the capacity of such counties to benefit from extractive resources. Money that I have instructed to be disbursed this year. We recognize that the bottom-up economic transformation agenda will achieve its highest potential and lift up